Hi everyone, Real Finny Seal Tano here, the internet's laziest movie nerd. Park Chan-wook is a South Korean filmmaker who has gotten quite a lot of recognition over the years, and for good reason. He started off as a film critic, and as far as I'm aware, none of his reviews have an English translation. Disappointing, I know. However, Park Chan-wook soon transitioned from film criticism to filmmaking, and has now become one of the most recognizable faces in international cinema. His style often consists of bold cinematography, expressive editing, and a blend of bleak subject matters with dark comedy, similar to another South Korean filmmaker, Bong Joon-ho. Yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on over there in that country, but the directors there know how to make some damn good cinema. So, since I am a big fan of his work, and with a new project on the horizon, I thought it would be fun to rank every Park Chan-wook film. Keep in mind, these are just my dumb opinions, you don't have to agree with them.
이렇게 뒤로 이렇게 제껴서 그냥 흘러가는 거를 멍하게 보고 있는 그런 영화는 별로 나는 무슨 재미를 보는지 모르겠어요. 그렇게 편안한 휴식이 필요하면 찜질방을 가지 왜 극장을 가나 나는 알 수가 없어요.
No, I did not make a typo. Let me explain. In 1992, Park Chan-wook released his directorial debut, The Moon is the Sun's Dream, and then his second film in 1997 called Trio. However, Park Chan-wook hates these movies so much to the point where he doesn't even want people to watch them. Now, directors hating their own movies is nothing new, but hating your own film to the point where you don't want anyone to watch it? Damn, dude. Despite this, I still probably would have watched these two movies if I could actually find them. I'm telling you, I looked for hours, that's a lie. I looked for like 10 minutes and then gave up. But hey, if the man himself doesn't want me to watch them, then I'll do as I'm told.
So jumping ahead slightly, you made your first two features. I think the first one is 1992 and then 97. And they weren't particularly successful in Korea.
예, 좀 뛰어넘는 김에 좀 더 많이 뛰어넘으시는 게 어떨까요?
Well, while you're at it, why don't we just jump ahead into much later?
Stoker is okay. This is Park Chan-wook's only English language film, and it's not nearly as good as his Korean works. This is a loose retelling of Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt, a pretty great movie, but not one of Hitchcock's best. Like every other film from Park Chan-wook, the cinematography and editing are just insane here. However, much of this movie feels very surface level, which I know is a crazy thing to say about a Park Chan-wook film. The acting in this film isn't bad necessarily, but it isn't particularly great either. Furthermore, my two main issues I had with the original Shadow of a Doubt aren't exactly fixed in this movie. I still find the story to be a little too predictable, and I still find the ending to be pretty unsatisfying. It's not a bad film, but it didn't really do much for me. I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay is strange. I'm not sure why this film was so difficult to find, but I ended up watching it anyway. I will be transparent though, the copy of this movie I ended up finding wasn't in the best condition. The video quality was great, but there were a few scenes where the audio quality got pretty distorted. Not a huge deal, and I'm obviously not holding that against the film itself, but it irritated me nonetheless. However, it was either this weird-ass copy of the film that I found or not watching the film at all, and I chose the former. Despite all those hurdles, I was still able to enjoy this film quite a bit. Honestly, I think that goes to show Park Chan-wook's immense talent as a director. Even when you're in a pissy mood, he's still able to impress you with creative filmmaking techniques and engaging writing. That or someone drugged me before I watched the movie, I don't know.
This is crack.
It's easily Park Chan-wook's most surreal and heartwarming film. Although Park Chan-wook is well known for infusing dark comedy into his films, this is the one film of his that is most overtly a dark comedy. It has a strange and twisted sense of humor that I really enjoyed. The presentation of the film is stylish and expressive, as usual for Park Chan-wook. Also, the central love story is wonderfully charming. It's far from Park Chan-wook's best film, but I don't think it's his worst either. It's a solid and quirky little movie that I'd recommend checking out if you're curious, and if you can find a decent copy of it. Thirst is a movie about a priest becoming a vampire and trying to prevent his inner vampire counterpart from committing sin. What an awesome concept for a movie. Song Kang-ho's performance as the priest is fantastic, as usual for him. The cinematography and the editing are so stylish and intricate. The score manages to be both beautiful and eerie. This movie manages to mix disturbing horror with a dark sense of humor in such a gripping way. The blood effects are also delightfully gruesome and cringe-inducing. This film is also very weird, and I love that. Fuck normalcy. If you want a taste for how weird this movie is, my roommate walked up behind me while I was watching it and asked, "What are you watching?" And that shit genuinely startled me. Yeah, it's one of those movies where you just feel awkward watching it with other people around. My only main issue with the film is the rules about how vampires work isn't really explained that well. There are obviously some movies where an explanation like that isn't necessary. However, I feel like this movie wanted to give a proper explanation on vampires, but it just didn't really come together. But overall, this is a wild movie that I'd recommend watching if you haven't already. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is the first movie of Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy, and it's fantastic. All the acting performances are great, especially Song Kang-ho. The characters are all fascinating in their moral ambiguity. In fact, almost every character in Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy is morally ambiguous. There are no truly good people in this movie, and I love that. Every character has their motive and reasoning for their actions, but whether or not those actions are justified is up to the viewer. The cinematography is colorful, and I really enjoyed the film's use of wide-angle lenses. This film is very stylistically stripped back compared to Park Chan-wook's other films, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The film has such an angry atmosphere while still managing to be grounded in realism. The violence in this film is wonderfully grotesque. When a character gets stabbed, you don't just see blood, you see the gape that the knife left in the character's flesh. The violence in this film is made all the more unsettling by the film's lack of a soundtrack. Most of the film is bathed in this uncomfortable and eerie silence. This movie manages to be funny, tragic, intense, and brutal all at the same time. The story that this movie tells also makes many unexpected twists and turns. Admittedly, there were a few scenes in the film that weren't very engaging for me, but overall, this is an amazing revenge thriller that I'd recommend watching. Lady Vengeance is the final film from Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy. It's definitely the weirdest and most surreal movie of the trilogy, which is really saying something. The cinematography is gorgeous, and I especially love the use of black and whites during the latter half of the film. The production design is colorful and expressive. The editing is so slick, stylish, and energetic. Just like Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, the violence in this film is wonderfully grotesque and disturbing. The story of this film is also dark, tragic, and pretty fucked up. The film looks at the emotional turmoil that revenge can bring in a truly gut-wrenching way. The characters are easier to empathize with here than the other two movies in the trilogy, but that doesn't automatically justify anyone's horrific actions. It's a profound blurring of good and evil, to say the least. Admittedly, I think the first 30 minutes of the film can be a bit messy at parts, but overall, this is an amazing revenge thriller that I'd recommend watching if you haven't already. Joint Security Area is simply fantastic. In an alternate universe, this would have been Park Chan-wook's debut film, but things didn't work out that way because this is the universe where grown adults like Bluey for some reason. Anyways, this is a brutal look at the conflict between North and South Korea, but one that also manages to be hopeful and optimistic. All the performances in this film are incredible. Song Kang-ho and Lee Byung-hun in particular give brilliant and believable performances in this film. The editing is wonderfully stylish, as usual for Park Chan-wook. Admittedly, the first 30 minutes of the film didn't exactly grab me in the way that I would have hoped for. I wouldn't consider the beginning of the film boring, but I just wish it was a little more engaging for me. Luckily, as soon as the flashback started, I was hooked. The middle chunk of this film is surprisingly wholesome and heartfelt, with some very well-written dialogue as well. Then the final act comes around, and it's one hell of a gut punch. This is an incredible movie that I'd highly recommend watching if you haven't already. Decision to Leave was my first Park Chan-wook film, and what an incredible introduction. This film is a brilliant mixture between a neo-noir thriller and a tragic romance film. This film isn't nearly as violent or disturbing as some of Park Chan-wook's other films, but that's also what makes the film so unique. The romance between Song So-rae and Jang Hae-jun is superb. It's a relationship that grows, changes, and diverges in ways that are enticing to watch unfold. The cinematography is so vibrant and colorful. I especially love those mirror shots. They are so simple yet so effective. The editing, the music, and the sound design are all impeccably crafted. Park Chan-wook's dark and dry sense of humor is hilarious as always. The action scenes and suspenseful moments are breathtaking. The emotional moments are heartbreaking, especially in that unforgettable third act. The plot can certainly be a little dense at times, but the symbolism, subtleties, and mesmerizing nature of the script make it ripe for interpretation and countless rewatches. It's one of those movies where after it's over you just want to stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes or take a nosedive into the ocean, or another stupid analogy that I can't come up with right now. I love this movie and I'd highly recommend watching it if you haven't already. The Handmaiden is... wow. The performances from Kim Tae-ri, Kim Min-hee, and Ha Jung-woo are all fantastic. The strange and complicated love triangle that forms between the characters is truly mesmerizing to watch. Even though Count Fujiwara is a pretty despicable character, Uncle Kazuki is just on another level of evil. Talk about a chokeable character. The editing is wonderfully stylized. The cinematography is intricate and gorgeously composed. The production design is colorful and does a brilliant job at capturing the time period. The music is both beautiful and anxiety-inducing, and of course the writing is incredible. The movie is split up into 3 distinct acts, each of which is very captivating. The first act introduces you to this nice yet complicated lesbian romance. The second act is tragic, harrowing, gut-wrenching, and sickening in the best of ways. Then the third act showcases all the gruesome violence that is typical for a Park Chan-wook film. Park Chan-wook's dark sense of humor is also just on point here.
제가 제일 중시한다고 감히 말씀드릴 수 있는 요소입니다. 유머라는 것은. 그래서 제가 어떤 스크리닝이 있을 때 제가 이제 참석하지 모든 스크리닝에 제가 참석할 수 없으니까 이제 보고 온 사람들한테 항상 묻는 것이 많이 웃었어요? 라고 그걸 제일 먼저 묻습니다. 근데 우선 중요한 것은 문화와 언어 장벽을 넘기가 제일 어려운 것이 유머이기 때문에 그것이 전달됐다면 다른 것들 모두가 잘 전달됐다고 볼 수 있는 그런 기준이 되기 때문이죠.
This is a twisted yet masterfully executed movie about feminism, class, and sexuality. Highly recommend watching this movie if you haven't already, and it's a great movie to watch with your parents. Don't watch this movie with your parents. Maybe a predictable choice, but Oldboy is my favorite Park Chan-wook film. The film is a loose adaptation of a Japanese manga under the same name written by Nobuaki Minegishi and Marley Caribou. The premise and characters from the manga are kept the same, while everything else came from Park Chan-wook's own twisted mind. This is the second movie from Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy, and it's a film that completely revels in its own strangeness. Choi Min-sik gives an outstanding, badass, and audacious performance as the main character. Dae-soo Oh's character progression throughout the film, as well as his desire for freedom, are also mesmerizing to watch unfold. Yoo Ji-tae gives an incredible performance as the slimy and despicable villain Lee Woo-jin, a character who sets up one of, if not the evilest plan in all of cinema. I love this stylized and expressive editing throughout this entire film. The cinematography is very intricate and impressive. The music is both bombastic and gorgeous, and I especially love those renditions of classical songs. I also love the way this movie plays with emotions. It's an absolutely tragic story, but the film still manages to have a funny sense of humor. This movie can also be very disturbing and dark at times, which makes for an unforgettable experience. This movie also has some badass action in it, especially that impressive as hell one-take hallway fight scene. Oh, and calling that third act insane would be an understatement. One of of the greatest twists I've ever seen in a movie. This movie deconstructs the selfish and destructive nature of revenge and vengeance in such a powerful way. Watch this movie if you haven't already. So yeah, that was my Park Chan-wook ranking. If any of the movies I talked about sounded interesting to you, check them out. Next video, I'm talking about Charles Manson. Subscribe or something like that. Bye bye.